Dzień dobry, witam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie na naszym kolejnym spotkaniu w ramach Akademii Filmu Dokumentalnego, część pierwsza. Ale to spotkanie nie będzie się dzisiaj odbywało w języku polskim, bo mamy tutaj znakomitego, fantastycznego i wspaniałego gościa, którym jest Erik Gandini, reżyser filmów dokumentalnych, a wy oglądacie dzisiaj w ramach naszych zajęć film Świat po pracy, jego ostatni dokument. Porozmawiamy trochę właśnie o kontekstach, o podejściu do kina dokumentalnego, o bohaterach, o formie dokumentalnej, także bardzo się cieszę, że to się udało, but I'm gonna now switch to English. I guess you understood some parts of what I just said. I just introduced you and said that you are amazing and that we are really happy that you could join us, dear Erik, from Sweden, where it's -14 today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's fantastic. I mean, I don't see the audience now, but I can sort of picture it. But I see you and I hear Apollonia, who is supposed to go to sleep. So I will maybe I can start speaking slowly, like
And I'm gonna do this, and she's gonna
to help her fall asleep,
Yeah, after work you can sleep. That's the whole concept of some idea that you can use your time in your life. I'm so glad that we have a chance to talk about this film now, because it's also entering VOD. So everybody basically in Poland is going to have a chance to watch it. It was in cinemas, but of course, after work you can watch a film about what people think about the future of working, actually. So I wanted to start with the film itself, because but it's not easy to start with the film without the connection to other works of yours. I wanted to ask you, what comes first, people or the idea or the thesis that you have, that you want to try to implement or to prove with your film? How does it work? And how did it work?
I will jump back a little bit also, because considering that we are talking to students also, I will just go back to when I myself came to Sweden from Italy, and I discovered documentary. I grew up in the worst thinkable media TV condition during Berlusconi's era and never saw a documentary, basically. So when I came to Sweden, I was attending film school, and when I learned, the whole teaching of documentary at that time was very much focused on characters, or even portrait. The idea was that you should get very close to a character, that there should be this intimacy, this sort of closeness to the character. We had to learn that, you should feel the smell of the character through the film. And perhaps also that in the best film, think about the character would cry, or there would be some very sort of emotional moment. That was my teaching.
Discovery of the very aspect of human being with the film, or something like that.
Exactly like that. And it's very true also that still today the most successful films, documentary films, are often portraits of like celebrities, famous people, where you sort of, because we are interested in people, that's basically, it's as simple as that. But then, reality TV came into the picture, and I felt this sort of, they kind of invaded and almost turned our methods into like a business idea, because it was in the early 2000s, so it was a perfect combination. Audiences interested in like real life people. They're cheap for production, and also there were so many young narcissists who are ready to do whatever just to appear on television. That combination kind of messed up my own way of thinking. I wanted to distance myself, and also I felt that there was something in becoming too dependent on a character, or like if you are just following one person, that as a filmmaker it's complicated in terms of a relationship. You have to film a person for a long time. It's not like an actor that you pay. I mean, all these things.
You are like responsible for what happens with your, like, entering somebody else's life. Sometimes it can be harmful also. We know those.
These are things that we filmmakers talk about, but I mean, in the end, for me, slowly I turned more from like a character-driven storytelling to what I say idea-driven. And I did a film like Surplus in 2003 that was perhaps the first like more like essay documentary, where you don't follow one person, you more follow an idea or through several characters in different countries. And After Work is precisely that. I mean, it's a look at work, not as you usually do, as a necessity that people are victims of, which is super important. It's also sort of the traditional way of looking at work, but looking at work as an idea that we have kind of hard time freeing ourselves from. Because this talking today, now when I started the film, it wasn't like that, but now this whole discussion of technology, artificial intelligence replacing us, it exploded. It's exactly like 1 year ago, ChatGPT entered the picture. All these notions, for me, the sort of the riddle that intrigued me was not this, could say, old story of machines replacing human, but the real, exactly. But the real was for me, is like, what if we cannot stop working because this idea dominates so much our existence, that life should be about work, that we should define ourselves with our professional title. That's the first thing we ask when we meet each other, and so on and so on. So what if we are so stuck in this that we cannot invent something else?
It's really interesting that you said, like, because the first thing that everybody asks is like, what you do in life. And it's not the question about what you actually do, what you want to do, what are like your, I would say, like characteristic things in you, but what you do. I mean, like, do means work in this sentence, which is like a metaphor of what you are actually talking about. And I wanted to ask you about the work itself, because from what you said, I just reminded myself about Max Weber and this like ethic approach to work, that you're not gonna go to heaven if you're not gonna work hard in this life, because that's like what makes you go there, actually. And it's like a religious approach to work. But in your film, we don't see that much of this kind of ethical approach. People are working for many different reasons, but what you discovered when you were like talking to them?
I mean, that idea, the Max Weber, the work ethic, we're still living according to that idea. And this is also what makes the whole story interesting to me, that we are living on an old idea that is kind of obsolete, that is kind of surpassed now. But it is true that if you look at the power of this idea, it was super meaningful. It was probably the best idea that could dominate when the Industrial Revolution started. It was a time when everybody had to work, even children had to work from birth to death. It was a time when there was so much to be built. So there is it's not a coincidence that idea became so dominant in a time when it was exactly what was needed. But my feeling now is that we are in a time when that idea is not relevant anymore, but we have not come up with anything new. But yes, it was also a religious belief that God is happy when you work, that with the sweat of your forehead you will gain a place in paradise. I mean, it's very strong. It's so strong that we kind of don't remember that we didn't work so much before the Industrial Revolution. We had a completely different approach. There was not a sense, and for many years, in fact, which is not part of the film, for many years when the Industrial Revolution started, the big challenge was to make people adopt this idea so that the Industrial Revolution could take place in all its forms. So yeah, I mean, the first part of the film is about the present. So you have dysfunctional example of how this idea is really not working anymore. Or you have the US where people never take any vacation. They call it the no vacation nation. It's a rich country with this kind of, it's a paradox. They don't have to work so much. And then Korea, where they at least recognize the problem, they address it. I mean, this minister of labor, who's probably the only minister of labor in the world, who's on a mission to make people work less, with his like campaign video, with a PC off policy, when they sort of start turning off computers in a centralized manner. But especially for you who have seen the film, there's a little advertising, like a 30-second advertising that is produced by the Ministry of Labor to sort of make people, to help people who are working too much with ideas of how life could be instead. So they said, like, go home and, you know, do some
a little, whatever that means.
Fantastic. Or maybe you could paint a painting, or even better, spend time with your family like you're doing now with the children. because literally, I mean, it's a society where this is such a big problem, that the culture of work is so dysfunctional, that you have generations after generations of children who grew up never meeting the fathers, especially, you know. So and this is not like one, it's like a lot of people who have this common experience. So some things you can measure, like, you know, diseases or problems related to overworking, but this relational thing, what was struck me most when I was there, like, so I mean,
it's like Swedish theory of love, but with work as one of the topics. I mean, like your previous film also talked about how living in the contemporary times affects the relationships in the families, especially in Sweden, which is like one of those countries that many countries aspire to be like. And there is this like a bit darker side, I would say, or like a consequence of what's the approach in there. And in here we see like a next part of this kind of story that also focuses on work and its effects on our lives. What would you say?
Exactly, and just since you asked me first if the characters come first or the story, I would say that in this method of working that I like to do now, it's almost like the country comes first, and like as Sweden is really good to talk about modernity, about the like super modern society when you never need anybody else, where you should just be self-sufficient to the extreme. Of course, the US and Korea are really creatively stimulating places to capture an idea of work that I want to capture. So for me, first comes the country that is interesting. Then I try to find characters that I like, that I think sort of carry with themselves and sort of transmit in the film this into, because you can always film experts, right, who will tell you super interesting things, that they are there. I like experts too. I like people who can really put words on things in a beautiful way. But still, and this is what I love with my job as a documentary filmmaker, that you can meet people who, for me, are the true experts. They're usually like very ordinary people who can really carry forward and just make it really true, not just an intellectual maneuver notion. And in that sense, I think I belong to a tradition also in fiction film, where you see the character in the center, but maybe not so much as a portrait of one person, where you end up focusing on one individual, but you still keep this kind of perspective which looks at society from above.
Especially when it's like a sociological storytelling. It's not focusing on the psychology of people so much. They are more like in the background, but the whole concept is in front. Sometimes they do it also in feature filmmaker, or TV series is better idea. For example, The Wire by David Simon is the idea of this kind of big picture. Let's call it the world, let's call it the city, let's call it the system. And then you see the characters coming second, just to illustrate what you want to really put in front in your story. So I think that this kind of sociological approach can be seen in your work from the perspective of a person that has seen a few of your films already. But you said about the first part of the film, and in the second part.
So that was the first part. I mean, I don't think, I hope you don't think about these things when you watch the film, but, you know, when we sit and edit, we try to
analyze it a bit.
Yeah. So we structure, because when you do essay films like I do, it's very difficult. You know, it can be so easily boring that people fall asleep watching them. You don't see where we're going with this story. So we need to find some sort of structure in a genre documentary where you don't have like a given dramaturgical structure as you can do in fiction film. You know, you have all different genres, the noir, the thriller, the you know, the drama, the romantic comedy, and yeah. But here, documentary, and this I want to say, for us who do, we kind of proud that we every time have to invent some sort of dramaturgical structure for every story we make. And so after this first US and Korea part, there is a little sequence about technology, because that's sort of the elephant in the room when you watch this situation. I think people like start thinking about, okay, so working when you don't need to work, it's like a scary scenario, especially now, obviously, when we see a future with maybe much more time for ourselves, much less work. So what are we going to do? And from there, we explore places, first Kuwait, and then Italy, where you can have some sort of sense of societies which are less, hopefully, less dominated by this idea of work. But in the case of Kuwait especially, you find exactly the same ideology. And I have to quote here, because part of this film is inspired by a sociologist. And this is a 2-line quote that inspired me. His name is Roland Paulsen. He's a friend in Sweden, young sociologist, who has been like vocal about criticizing the ideology of work. And what he means with ideology of work is, quote, a set of ideas, fears, conceptions that make us work as much as we do, sometimes even more, regardless of how effective technology is. So this 2-line thing, I can repeat it, a set of rules, ideas, conceptions, even fears that make us work as much as we do, sometimes even more than necessary, regardless of how efficient technology is. So this is exactly like that has this riddle, like why? What is it in this ideology?
I'm going to use it as a question for our students that they're going to have to put a little essay about after our meeting as a homework. So thank you for this quote. It's a great quote to start with. Yeah,
it's a great quote to start. And you know, sometimes I think I kind of built the whole film on this 2-line sentence. And when we went to Kuwait after, let's say, in the film, after Korea and the US, we were looking for like work-free existence. And you have all the possibility in Kuwait to work less, because you have all this money from oil, you have these expats or slaves who are doing all the work. And there you see that even when people have all the opportunity to, or their society, all the opportunities to work less, people are still asked to go to these offices and just pretend to work. So like strong is this idea, so strong is our inability to imagine a different relation to work that we...
Let me just ask a question. Does it mean that people are like boring? That they don't have ideas? What's the, what do you think about the fact that they still work if they don't really have to? They can read books, watch films, go traveling, do anything basically, and they go to work. What's the?
It's complicated. You're really asking the right question, but the thing is that they're not given the freedom. Like, here is the money, go and do whatever you want. It's like, here is the money, but please spend at least 6 hours a day, 8 possibly, but you can come late, but still go to the office every day. So they're not given the trust, the freedom, because the idea is that people are lazy. People are lazy. This is a very strong belief. So instead of giving them the freedom to do even when you can, you will still think that or the fear of what they would do.
That entering the darkest, timeline of Kuwait history with this kind of idea of basic income for them. I think it's a lack of trust and belief that people are deep down evil and lazy.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't believe that. I think that we are not trained in our lives, in the way the school system is. We're trained to be disciplined, to fight against our laziness because maybe it's there. Yeah, to believe that all we have to do is to get a job because that's the most important thing in life. So this is one of the big challenges if you look at the future, that we really have to not only fantasize of how life could be, but also accept that maybe we are not lazy. Maybe we are active, creative creatures who want to do good for society. All these things, are not there yet. But this is perhaps what the film, I hope, sparks in terms of a discussion.
Yeah. There is a book, How to Do Nothing, basically. It's an essay book by American artist. I think Jenny Fall is her name. I will have to check it for the students, and I'm going to send you the link to it. And she writes about the fact that, we are unable to do nothing and not to feel guilty with the fact that we are not doing anything at the very moment, that you always have to be busy with thinking, preparing. Even when you are on holidays, in a way, you are busy because you are busy trying to rest, because that's the time that you have to rest now, because this is the free moment in your life, and then you will have to be busy again. So there's no possible for us to do nothing. And she says, if we try to exercise this, really creative things come to us. We see what we really want to do. It always reminds me about this film, Up in the Air, I think was the title, about George Clooney, who's traveling and telling people in big corporations that they don't have work anymore. And there's a famous scene in this film that he talks to a man, and the man cries because that's the end of his life. And Clooney, of course, is a romantic vision of him being the gatekeeper of a new life for a person. And the guy says, "I always wanted to be a cook." And Clooney says, "Now is the moment that you can do it, because you are not gonna be here anymore. It's not the dream job that you are doing here. Maybe it's time." And he's 60, of course, this guy. So the opportunities for him are not that really big. But that scene is now you can do whatever you want because you're not gonna work.
And maybe we are there in history, in our current modern history. Maybe we are there, that we suddenly have to really wake up every morning and think, okay, what do I want to do? And also give people the trust, but also the training to really learn how to look into yourself, find your passion. You have the money, you have the basic income, And so I really think there is a misconception. I'm happy that you raised this, even with both the book example and the film you mentioned. I think there is a lot of misconception about laziness. And I remember, when Poland entered the European Union, in Sweden, there was this almost like a political narrative that was thrown out about, the Poles are coming, and they invented even an expression called social tourism, meaning that, they would come here and benefit from our welfare state and just be lazy. One of the biggest misconceptions in history, it never happened. Poles that came to Sweden, hardworking people, not only the plumber story you maybe remember, but this is a repeating sort of narrative, which defines the whole example of Kuwait too, that people are essentially lazy, so you have to put them behind a desk in an office with a lot of fake simulacra of job, because what else? What if? This is just crazy.
That also reminds about this book by David Graeber, Shit Jobs, that you just have to sit through, no matter what you do, because the big corporation needs to move the money around, because that's how capitalism works. And as you said before, we are entering a bit different era. Maybe we are also to mention the fact that before God was the idea or the authority that make you work. And now in here, instead of this lamp, you have like a big capitalism thing that makes you feel and think that this is what you are absolutely supposed to do with whole your life. And maybe it's this idea is crashing nowadays because there are so many different ideas how we can maybe live differently. So that's the also thing that we need to mention in here.
It's great that you mentioned David Graeber book.
I thought today, you know, that if he was alive, he would be this expert in your film. Am I right?
I mean, he was super inspiring. I mean, he's you know, yeah, it's unfortunate he's dead now, but I mean, he was really one of the first to really introduce this surprising idea that it was not only the sort of the old communist system created like zero unemployment through fake jobs, but even capitalism has really created this. And you know, in all this also, when you look at capitalism, when you look at, I mean, I grew up with this notion that work makes man noble. It's in Italian, il lavoro nobilita l'uomo. And it's like, and I think in every country you have this idea that, you know, by working you become a better person. And in the film, when I met, like, there's a very rich woman who never worked her whole life, Rory, and she like is a kind of a living example that we are creative, active people. And she fills her life with a lot of things. She has trained herself as none of us do to really like every day deciding what to do. And it takes training. Some people get scared if you give them the freedom, like this retired person in George Clooney's story. I mean, they freak out, like, what am I going to do? We're not really there. But in her case, she's really trained thanks to her privileges. But she's also, for me, maybe the ultimate proof that one, you can really live an active life even with a basic income, plus in her case, basic income, because she has a really super rich. But also that it's not work that makes man noble, but it's freedom. And this is the big challenge for us to. This idea that work makes man noble has benefited definitely the capitalist system. It benefits the few, but it has not really benefited us in the same way. And I think, you know, technology, the whole point with technology is to make our life easier, you know, to ease us from job. And the notion that we shouldn't take this opportunity is like it's sad.
Especially that we can collaborate with technology. You mentioned AI before, and of course there was this big all the artists, all the translators, the, you know, animators, designers, they are gone because there's AI now. And it doesn't work like that, because the whole concept is just to connect those two things. I was a bit afraid because maybe, as you remember, I translated Swedish Theory of Love from English to Polish. So we were like, oh, there's not going to be job for a translator anymore, because it's possible to do it you know, with the technology. But there is so much nuance in the language that then before AI is going to learn this, I don't know if it's going to be even possible, because sometimes you just have to connect what you see with the emotions and with the words, and then you see the, you know, whole idea of language that it's there and what actually was supposed to be said. So I guess we can always make ourselves useful with, you know, like correcting or teaching, or
and maybe just gain some extra time, because I know when you translate with like Google Translate or something, you get like a first draft that can makes your work easier for sure. And the same applies to ChatGPT. You can save time. So what you're going to do with that extra time? Maybe it's you know, it's a good opportunity.
But let's talk about, because you said a bit about the characters, and you said that you go like on a journey and to meet these people and to talk with them. But that's one thing, but the way you show them, you mentioned before, and we know those like talking heads from documentaries, that you see a person somewhere with nice or not really nice background, and they just talk, and then there's some archive footage. It is like typical documentary that could be also, just showing how people work in the factories and so on, so like illustrating, I mean. But in here you are interviewing and illustrating at the same time. So I wanted to ask you how you invent those ideas to take those characters on some journeys, little journeys, or just to put them in some situations, because you always do it. And it's never boring, because it's really, really creative part of the documentary.
Thank you. I mean, I like to do long interviews, and when I do long interviews, this gives me a lot of idea, because they sort of enter the mind of the person I'm talking to. And on a little aesthetical note, I also use, if you look at after work, you see that the eyes of the interviewee are straight into the camera. Now, usually you interview someone, the eyes are like this.
Yeah.
But we use a box that have, and these are small details. This is actually Errol Morris, an American documentary filmmaker, who developed this little technique. It's a box with mirror you put in front of the camera, so you have the eyes straight into the camera. And but long interviews for me are more like a collection of the inner universe of the person. Then, the creative part is to choose things that this person does, or sometimes maybe even doesn't do, like but to agree with the character. Okay, so I want to illustrate, for example, we're in Kuwait, and we know that they have a huge problem with diabetes. So the state is trying to make people, it's the according to the World Health Organization, Kuwait is the most physically inactive country in the world. So they have a problem. People are not, fit. So they had these campaigns where ask people to go to these shopping malls in the morning. It's too hot outside, so you have to do some power walking in these malls, which people do. And so Mekdad, our character, I don't think he would normally do that, but he was, for the sake of the storytelling. So we went there, and this whole situation in this shopping mall is, we get there when suddenly there are a lot of people doing this power walking, and we can turn that into sort of a scene as an example. And so, as just exactly as you say, I am trained into this, and I love character. I'm curious about people. I can really listen to people for hours. It's really my joy, and curiosity is an underestimated attitude. To be curious to other people, you can really mirror yourself. I recognize myself in all these characters somehow, and so curiosity is my driving force. But then there is also this joy of trying to capture things that cinematically can express what you're talking about. So let's say Josh, the busy guy, in the beginning, I mean, we arranged to be when he was doing one of his lectures, which he normally does. So that's what he does, Then, some details, like he's in this room with these people, audience present. I remember I bought like an American flag, which is not there. I put it in the background because documentary is an art form. Let's make it clear. It's not journalism. You really want to make sense of your absolutely unique perspective as a filmmaker. So your look at the world is central. Contrary to journalism, where you should be neutral, in creative documentary, it's all your emotions, your temper, your mood, your anguish, even your political opinions. All this is what we see as an asset to make your look on the world absolutely visible in the story, And it doesn't mean that you have to stand with a microphone telling what you think. You can make your point with music, with editing, with your, So the tools of filmmaking are many. Music is a very strong tool,
that's what I wanted to talk a bit about.
But long story short,
and
you look at
busy coming back, and
the busy. I work with an incredibly creative editor. His name is Johan Söderberg, who is both an editor and a musician, and he both edits and composes the music, the soundtrack in this case of After Work. And he's also, in his musical, skills and talent and tradition, he uses also words as a part of a musical element in the editing. So picking up a few lines by Josh when he talks about "I'm so busy," and turn that into almost like a repetitive part of it's really, you could say, I came to love this language because it's less rational for the brain. It's not like you're just listening to an expert. It starts reaching you in the lower part of your body. Like it's a physical, it's a more an emotional. You're addressing the hearts and not only the minds. Okay. And that's for documentary. When I started making documentary, they were very sort of brainy. It's like going to a conference, they were directing themselves to American documentaries. I hope there are no one is offended, but American documentaries, I think, are still very much like that. The talking head,
information, knowledge, science.
Knowledge. And for me, information today you can get at fingertips in a second. If you want to know about ideology of work, or in a second you can know all the information you can Google that, but to have a physical experience which somehow is similar to the one that I have the privilege to have as a filmmaker, because I go to Kuwait, I go to the US, I meet these people. Can I give you a fraction of my physical encounter with reality? That's the goal. And so it involves a lot of, hopefully, emotional takes and people. When you meet someone, if you meet Josh, the American motivational speaker, you get something, and I know you all know what I'm talking about. The things go from being like an intellectual notion to becomes a real experience.
Yeah, and the same was with Swedish theory of love. Even on this like darker side, I'm not sure if you remember this anecdote, but I told you that before, that when I was when we met first time and had the Q&A on stage here in Warsaw, there was a guy sitting in the row in front of me during the screening, and he said to his friend, "If you watch this film, you would never, ever want to go to Sweden." So it's like for good and for bad. You can be like, anti or something.
Every country has this very sort of nationalistic approach of looking at themselves as the center of the world, but also being like perfection. In Sweden, it's easy because even people abroad look at Sweden as a reference for perfection. And we are the most modern country in the world. And even when I did Videocracy, which you've watched, I got a little tired of, being Sweden, seeing all these people laughing at Italy as this little crazy Berlusconi run, Videocracy. So even there, I really wanted to provoke this notion of perfection, because Sweden is a country that is very arrogant. It's never outspoken, but if you come from another country, especially if you come from the south of the world, you will receive this message that, okay, you have come to perfection, to the most modern, successful society in the world, so you can really learn from us, but you can never teach us anything. And this is a very, very dangerous attitude that actually Zygmunt Bauman, Polish master of sociology, who is part of Swedish theory, it's not in the film, but I remember I asked him, like, okay, Zygmunt, you've been studying societies your whole life. He was 92 at the time. What's the perfect society? And he was so clever. He said, I wish I invented this myself. He said, I've been studying societies, the whole world in the history. There's no perfect society. My definition, he said, my definition of the perfect society is society that doesn't believe to be best, that is always questioning itself, always, ready to look at itself with self-critique and so on.
Ah, that's a good approach, and
That's
it's
a good
good
approach.
to think about it as a human being, also not only as a citizen of a country.
Exactly. He's into this. It's called fallibilism. It's a philosophical approach that you might be wrong.
Yeah.
Don't go walk in the world believing that you know everything because what you have learned is absolutely true and right.
It's also a good lesson for a documentary filmmaker, that you are always coming from this kind of point, that I don't know, let's check, let's see if I'm right or I'm wrong. The thesis is there, and it's not like an answer, I would say.
Exactly that. I call it like also a what if what if approach, that you like, okay, work, but what if we chose.
I have another question. So, because I know that you are really interested with this film, and also as a professor of documentary, with what's the future bring, and how that's gonna affect the way the documentaries are made and the cinema, because we are in this like really weird moment with streaming taking over, people not going to cinemas, and the world is changing and the film is changing. So what do you think, what's going to happen next? Be a prophet a bit.
No, I have this huge privilege as a professor now, that I can really also embrace my own reflection on for example, like documentary as a genre. When I did the Swedish Theory of Love, the film was criticized. When it came out, people, especially in Sweden, felt, I was touching a nerve that was sensitive, and people were saying, but this is not the Sweden I recognize. You're not portraying things how they are, and my whole life as a filmmaker, I've always loved showing showing things how they feel. I told you this before. It's like this creative approach. But in the case of the Swedish Theory of Love, I was also not looking at the present, or not looking at how things there are now, but how they could be if we continue embracing this notion of independence and self-sufficiency and autonomy. I was like, okay, what's beyond this idea? What will we find? And so I was looking at the world, or Sweden, more in the perspective of the near future, you could say. And a documentary is not supposed to do that. Documentaries are usually capturing the present, or maybe reviewing the past. Future is for science fiction, it's not for us. So in my project called The Future Through the Present, which is connected to After Work, it's we call it artistic research. I was like, okay, but what if documentary could experiment with some sort of aesthetics and so on, so we can sort of create a projection into the future through stuff shot now. And that's exactly my mindset when making After Work. Again, I hope you don't think about it when you watch it, but if you have the feeling of, okay, you are in the present in the US and Korea, but slowly then you get some sort of reflection of how things could be. You have Kuwait, you have Italy, so that's enough for me. It's like you're looking at things in the present that create some sort of conversation with future scenarios, and very unresolved. In the film doesn't give any resolvement, and also this is also a choice of dramaturgy that, as research is, you never come with a sort of a final solution, and solution is what films generally offer the audience. You want to feel after the screening of the film, catharsis. Everything is better now. But Afterwards, on the contrary, ends with this question, which is annoying. People were not applauding after the film, and I was really worried in the beginning. But then, it's a choice.
It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
So the future, to end the reflection, the future through the present is, you could say, claim from documentary film to conquer the chronological dimension, which is not for us the future, in our own way. And it's just an experiment. I'm not sure it works, but it's an invitation for us filmmakers. And there are many like me. I think us who are into this expansion of documentary also could be, not only what it is, we try to work with hypotheses. We try to claim our right as artists, as filmmakers, to speculate, to have this what if approach. And if you embrace that, then you're really also relieving yourself from the restriction of what traditionally is a documentary. You're just observing, you fly on the wall, you look at things, you don't take a stance. And so perhaps we're just trying to expand this genre.
Yeah, it feels like, this another sociologist, let's mention him also, Immanuel Wallerstein, was saying that the fact how the future is going to look depends basically on what we are doing now. So shaping the future in a way with the way we are thinking and also the way we are creative has a meaning, and it can impact the outcome, actually.
Thank you for phrasing it like that, Kaya, because it's precisely, documentary is very good at like criticizing things, say, oh, things are bad. There's a political genre of like showing how bad things are. But I think there is a necessity now to start using more fantasy, like, okay, really discuss how we would like things to be,
Yeah.
And there are few like artistic movement. Futurism, unfortunately, was a very fascist idea or fascist cultural movement. Futurism was very much like that. When art took, the lead and said like, the future will be better and look how things could be. And I think there is too little of that in documentary.
Yeah, but have you heard about solar punk?
No?
No? Because we have this whole idea of cyberpunk, that the future with the technology is going to be dark like Blade Runner. But there's also another one, which is called solar punk, that it's going to be bright, colorful, I would say, there's going to be place for plants and animals connected with technology. And it's like a really positive, optimistic vision of the future. And it's not as popular, of course, as cyberpunk is, because we love dark stories and we want to be a bit afraid. But we don't think about the fact that, the way we think is going to happen later, that as an outcome of our thinking. And there are those ideas of solar punk now implemented in fashion, for example, in literature, in sci-fi. I can send you some links about it, because that's like one of those things that we are talking about, that you can invent the future with the way you want it to happen, actually, because that's who we are responsible for, that what's going to happen later, right?
I think it's very, very, this is the point.
Yeah.
Like in Terminator, no faith, that we shouldn't be victim of things, but really be in command.
Yeah, we could talk more and more about the bright future that's coming, but can you just tell us what you are working on nowadays? It's going to be a documentary.
I'm so bored because I know I never do that, but it's not personal, but I never talk about my project. It's so much, because I have this experience like with Afterwork, when I was telling like my friends, oh, I'm doing a film about work, they're like, oh, so interesting, so that's
I'm just going to be excited then, and
I'll
waiting
be really
for
happy to come back and talk more about it.
Yeah, hopefully. I hope it's going to be still some kind of documentary, so we're going to have
a chance to watch I love documentary is my tool, and I really, I don't look at it as some sort of way of working that is for a failed fiction filmmaker. I think we have so much in our methods, and I think also people like documentary. It's a good time for documentary. When I started, we were really fighting because we were using cameras that were so low res, and our production tool were like much not accepted as broadcastable as today. All that division is gone. You can shoot with a mobile phone in 4K, so we are the best time thinkable for or more democratic than it used to be.
That's the best ending of our conversation that I could imagine. Optimistic, positive, looking into bright future, and let's leave it at that. Thank you for having time for us and meeting us here from Sweden to Poland with after work. And yeah, I'm just waiting for what's the future is going to bring with your film.
Thank you, and maybe Apollonia's dreams will take us
She's
there.
sleeping now, so I guess she's what little children are dreaming about. Maybe this bright future that they don't really have to work and they can be creative, and that's going to be like a positive thing, not like a burden. We'll see. We'll see.
Let's keep it like that.
Thank
Okay.
you very much. Drodzy studenci Akademii Filmu Dokumentalnego, pytanie do filmu pojawi się na Facebooku pod filmem, będzie też na naszej stronie. Dziękuję wszystkim za uwagę. Bardzo się cieszę, że mogliśmy spotkać się z tak wspaniałym gościem. Do zobaczenia. Dziękuję.